Welcome to the Into AI Safety podcast, where we document my shift to a career in AI safety. This show aims to serve as a mentorship proxy for those getting into the field, and a mentorship amplifier for our guests and myself. As always, I am your host, Jacob Haynes. During the podcast, you may hear this sound, which denotes that I have included at least one link related to the content that preceded the sound. The purpose of this is to allow for citations and providing resources without breaking the flow of conversations. As per usual, items mentioned during asides will have links in the show notes as well. Today's episode features Esben Kran, who is the director of Apart Research, the group that runs the Alignment Jams hackathons, the Apart Lab Fellowship that I am participating in, and does novel and impactful AI safety and governance research. He will be providing feedback on an application that I submitted for Open Philanthropy's Career Transition Fund. While I didn't receive the funding, I do think that this conversation with Esben was overall very valuable, and I got some really good pointers during it. If you want to follow along with us during the episode, I have created a doc capsule of the application at the time of this conversation, which I will link in the show notes. With that, I'll let Esben introduce himself.
My name is Esben Kran, he, him. I'm the director of Apart Research at the moment.
So yeah, how do you want to go through this? What's the best way, do you think?
Treat it a bit like a user interview. So a technique that one of my friends from EA, Jonathan Kale, he introduced was the concept of basically doing a user interview of your blog post. But in this case, we can do the same for the funding application here. So I can be the user, the grant manager, the one who will say yes or no, and I can look through it. So of course, I'll see it from end to end, and I'll just give my thoughts. And then afterwards, we can chat about the meta questions. I think that works.
Okay, best. Sounds good. This episode is going to work a little differently than previous ones, because it is very much centered around a single document. This means that many comments are made with regard to specific sentences in the text. To help provide context, I will jump in and read portions of my response that Esben is reacting to. I will try to avoid this as much as possible, since I think that most of the conversation is understandable without the added information, but in some places, it is necessary.
Nice. So, as I see it here, we have 6-month career building transition to AI safety, Apart Research Fellowship, research grant proposal with CEO Bode Professor. I like Professor, AIC project, I know AIC, I know Apart, documented via Into AI Safety podcast. Interesting, it's gonna be fun. 6-month career building transition, so 20 to 30K, that does probably cover 6 months for someone. So currently working part-time to pay the bills, and that makes a lot of sense. You know, this is a very, very clear. It's very good in these applications to be very frank and to just like say it as it is. And sometimes you might have some grant applications where I might see something that takes off a little orange flag or something, and then I don't know if I can trust the rest of the application. So it's always about keeping those green flags just coming, and being very frank is one of those. So orange flags might be if you say, if you use like venture capitalists speak or something like that. So, I am seeking other opportunities within the space of dynamic something, agile workflows. Then that's going to be a little orange flag. But this makes a lot of sense, working part-time, and also gives a really good context to the grant, because that means, okay, well, this is what we're covering. So I would assume it's also more than opportunity cost. So besides the actual opportunity cost of knowing soon, than investing in the projects, it's probably also the point of like, all right, well, how soon can you move time over from part-time work into the air safety work?
Gotcha.
Perfect. What alternative options?
I would still attempt to move forward with these projects, but the amount of time I could allocate to them would be cut in half. As of right now, this is the first group I am applying for funding with, but I am planning on applying for a few others as well.
well, it makes a lot of sense. This is a classic AI safety thing, is that people really, really want to do these projects anyways, but don't have the same time, of course, because they also want to live. So it makes a lot of sense. So I look at this and it makes a bunch of sense that it would be a different amount. I would maybe be curious about like, what does that mean for the projects? Do you want to cut away some specific projects? And what does that affect, right? So basically, I would expect if you apply with 4 projects here, I would just comment here, applying with 4 projects, then 2 would go, or all would have diminished activity. Yeah. So what is the plan there? Then the proposal. So the goal: transition to a career in the AI safety space, ideally at the intersection of governance and technical work. Well, as Open Philanthropy, who recently wrote a blog post about the positions in AI governance that we would be excited for technical people to take on. This is good. Technical and governance, that sounds nice. That's what we are focusing on.
The submission that my team made for Apart Research's Evals Hackathon in November 2023 was awarded first place, and we were offered to join their fellowship. Our initial submission was titled Detecting Implicit Gaming Through Retrospective Evaluation Sets. The fellowship began this week, and we have not yet had our team's initial call, so I cannot provide too many more details.
I might want to hear a bit about what it is, what you expect the outcome to be, or what the objective of the project is, more than what the award is when you start, or like these questions. So it's valuable to know you have a team, you have mentorship. That's really good to know as a funder, because that means there's like some structure to it, something's moving forward. But then otherwise, it's nice to know that you have had good thoughts in research, and so you had a first prize. That's like good thoughts signal. But then there is the good thoughts signal of like actually showing what the project objective is, and of course this sounds like detecting implicit gaming through retrospective evaluation sets sounds quite important. I would be curious to just like see something concrete. In general, one of the dangers that can happen with research proposals is that you just don't get concrete enough. So there are some things you can keep quite vague, but then the like really important parts are the things you want to hone in on. So for example, for an engineering project, which many AI safety projects actually are, you might have specific questions around implementation not figured out, and that's completely fine. And just like keeping it vague, we're gonna build a platform, or this is what we're gonna spend the X amount of $1,000 on. There's gonna be salary for this, and that can be pretty vague, but then quite concretely on like, why do we think this matters, and what is the path to from like the question to the experiment itself, or something like this. It can, of course, in this case, it could also just be like investigating this effect that causes this, and so you don't have to have the experiment figured out, but like compressing it to this size. There's something in there. Then working with Dr. Robert McCurdy at CU Boulder to write a funding proposal for his related to AI system manufacturing. That's nice. Yeah. I might have questions in terms of AI systems and manufacturing. That by default doesn't sound like AI safety. So I would just like,
Yes.
Yeah, you can take that critique already at the gate, right? And say, this is focused on safety of manufacturing system, or like something like this, whatever it's focused on, without revealing what the project is about.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So getting experience with professors always really nice.
I will be working on the AISC project Luddite Pro, which will create a, quote, news website filled with stories, information, and resources related to the development of artificial intelligence in society, end quote. Specifically, I will be a deep dive into open source models, what their benefits or weak points are, arguments both for and against open sourcing models, along with the multiple different meanings that the phrase has, what companies that are releasing them, like Mistral and Meta, have to say about it, etc. In addition, I will be interviewing Dr. Peter Park on my podcast, CNX Project, about the work he is doing and why it matters. Similarly to the others, I see this as an opportunity to explore an area I don't have as much experience in under the mentorship of some that do.
Yeah, like this sounds great. Like the research question sounds great. Peter Parker. or just Peter Park, I guess, not the Spider-Man version. Yeah. So this seems good for you. Like I get it.
All of this will continue to be documented on my podcast, Into AI Safety, which documents my path towards a career in AI safety, with the goal of being a mentorship proxy for others in a similar place, now and into the future, and a mentorship amplifier for the guests. The feedback I've gotten so far has been overall really positive. I think it will be a valuable transitioning tool between something like the Blue Dot Impact AI Safety Fundamentals and research programs like MATS.
All let's work on a podcast, Into AI Safety. Yeah, I mean, this sounds great. I would find this very fun. Yeah, cool. This is really nice. Yeah, if you have a link, that's great as well, right? If I'm like,
Okay.
I probably wouldn't have time, but I would like always have a link for something that's active. If it looks good, of course. And in this case, yeah, it sounds active and it looks good. Nice. Personal statement. Writing should be clear and grammatical. So there is a document that Open Philanthropy has actually written, which I suggest one could read, which is about reasoning transparency, which some from our recent governance sprint might know about. That document just details, the writing style that they prefer. And so if you're applying to Open Philanthropy, it might be good to use their writing style. So it's called reasoning transparency, I believe.
Okay, cool.
Yes. And so that's their way of writing. It's often also the EA, AI safety sphere's way of writing, the Bay Area and so on. So Long-Term Future Fund, Open Philanthropy actors in that space as well. They do like that sort of writing. And it is quite nice if everyone in the world wrote like this. Of course, when we are seeking grants, we also want an accept. So for you might have heard of stories like research grants where you just use buzzwords like AI and stuff like this, and then you get the research grant. This is normal for other types of grants. We don't work too much with those types of grants because they're not as interested in the AI safety space on average, nor are we academic as an academic lab, so we have a bit less sway. Probably in a year or so, as people get more papers out, we could actually begin applying for these sorts of programs, which would be quite awesome, really. Would enable a lot in terms of what people are capable of within the organization and where we can direct our attention. But yeah, that's their writing style, and then you might use some others for different ones. I think in general it's good to have this one here, so the one without any orange flags.
Esben then reads through my personal statement and gives his thoughts. Unfortunately, I couldn't figure out a way to add in asides and splice content to make it super coherent. So I will just list the takeaways now and then skip that audio. I began the personal statement with a takeaway, which Esben thought was a good idea, since it really informs the reader of the perspective they should be reading the section from. He also liked that I mentioned computational modeling and not something that is strictly computer science. I think the idea here is just that the more diversity that can be included in the field, the better. I mentioned that I did some interviews which didn't pan out within the response. When he reads this, Esben's thoughts as this mock reviewer are basically, why didn't they pan out? As long as the answer doesn't reflect poorly on you, you should probably include it. He also mentioned that clarifying what else I was doing during the time I was upskilling would be valuable, since skilling up while also working a part-time or full-time job demonstrates dedication. Lastly, he mentions that reflecting on why previous application outcomes have varied, for example, not getting into Matt's program but being invited to join the Apart Fellowship, could be very useful. For example, how was the process different, and did you recognize any differences in yourself during those applications? That's it for this portion. On to the budget.
Then you have the approximate budget. Is it alright if I open this?
Oh, please do.
Nice.
Yes, many of my questions are about this, actually. So.
Nice. All right. See. I'll zoom out here. So funding amount 20,000, lower upper bound. It's good. So I don't know if they write it explicitly. Do they write a lower upper bound? Okay.
Well, they asked for range when they asked for the money amount, and so maybe more for me than them.
Yeah.
I wanted to put both numbers in and just look at the difference.
Yeah. So something interesting about this sort of funding is that it's actually quite often they are sometimes hurt by very high definition or something like that on the budget side, which is surprising. So,
Okay.
for example, they write here. So I haven't read the budget yet, so this is just a general comment. But in this case, they write, hey, just write standardized stipend for n years here instead of writing a budget. And this is very, very little budgeting, right? And so sometimes I've seen funding not be accepted because of the budget, basically, and because the budget was too low, like too little in that case. And I think to some degree, when you like step down on the smallest amounts, it's a question of that. So like, would they believe the project would be a success with that amount of funding or something like that? And then you have very specific entries into a budget that shows the sort of frugality or whatever that goes into that sort of project. And that might be surprising, and it is surprising. I was surprised to be rejected because of that, and I think in a follow-up interview it was fine. But there is a question of that in there. I am not sure with this specifically. Career shift funding. I would, for example, assume that. So, where are you in your educational journey at the moment, Jacob?
I have a master's degree.
So you have a master's degree, and then you've worked a bit.
Correct. I guess I've worked since mid 2022, so a year and a half.
Okay, perfect. So in that case, I would probably, as an open philanthropy grant maker, expect a much larger amount than 20 to 30K for 6 months if you're a full-time tech employee with a master's.
Okay.
So there are other funds that are quite frugal, but open philanthropy, they like pay fair salaries basically. So there you can just take your existing job and you can say, okay, lower bound is like 30K, or like the lower bound is what you've made here. And you have some reasons for that. You'd really like to go to EAG, Bay Area, and so on and so forth. And then the upper bound or the middle, the default is just like your salary compensated for six to 12 months or 6 months. And then 12 months is like your salary compensated for 12 months. And that's just your previous salary put on the table there.
Okay.
And that especially applies like, because of course they love when a career shift funding is like a career shift. So open philanthropy loves to actually incentivize this. And it shouldn't feel like a burden to change over to this more impactful career then.
Okay.
And so that's their mindset. And I think if you value yourself at 20, 30K in this way, I think you have a lower chance if you value yourself at a higher level.
I have a lower chance if I value myself at a higher level, or I have a lower chance right now.
You have a lower chance now, and then a higher chance if you put a higher number.
Got it.
And I think this is because they look at, I don't know, like I as an open philanthropy person would want to give you a fair compensation either way. So I would increase your grant request anyways. And then there is a question in there of, okay, is it a bit negative signal that you put a low value to the work you do or something like that? And so that's probably the thought that might happen. And of course, in many other nonprofit spaces, you have more of a question of frugality in nonprofits. But that is less the case with open philanthropy because of their background in tech and so on. So that's probably the number one thing is probably just increase the amount, make it completely based on full salary as a default. And then you have a middle, you have a lower and an upper. And then the lower is probably your upper here. If I look here, makes sense. So for example, $18,000 for a cost of living in Boulder. I think these are really good numbers to include just in case, or like previous salary, stuff like that. And you might say, a good thing is also to say like 75% of previous salary, so they can see that. It doesn't have to be 100%, but just like, so it's not a meager thing or something that shows some sort of pink flag there. yeah, so for example, with the boulder housing for $18,000, which is a lot coming from Europe, but I guess that's just US.
It's particular, like Boulder is a high cost of living. It's like 50% over the average, I think.
Oh wow, that's crazy. Yeah.
And that's all cost of living, not just housing.
So yeah, that's expensive, and 18,000 after tax would be at least 30K, right? And so then I'm like, oh, will it actually cover everything for you? And it probably wouldn't.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and for example, I would probably have, this is very precise. It's very nice for yourself. For them, they would probably just like lump this into one box that says, like research, compute, editing costs, or something like that.
Okay.
Or supporting costs, or operate, or like something like this. And good to show that you want to go to the conference. That's probably nice. Yeah. Then I will look at your CV. That's also fine to look at, right?
Yeah, please do.
So it looks good. Looks like a good CV. I mean, incident and problem management. That's pretty nice. That's like AI security related stuff. Data patterns, reliable information. Nice. Yeah. Nice. I'm wondering here if this is just like general CV critique, I guess, but like if these are more, I guess this is like a bit saying the thing twice and then with more words. And then I would probably want to hear from your peers if this is true, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. But it looks nice, and you've been very truthful in the rest of your application. So in that sense, probably nice. Publications, good stuff. Yeah, this looks technical and engineering. So I would be happy with that. Yeah, looks pretty good. I guess you'd have these, right? Academic transcripts.
Yes, I do. I just didn't upload them because I didn't think they were very interesting.
Yeah, no, that's good. I guess if they ask for it, I would assume it has an effect. Especially if you're 2.5 years into work.
Yeah. I'll definitely upload them on the actual application.
Then now we can jump to the questions if you'd like, or if you have any.
Yeah.
Pre-questions or thoughts about the structure.
I think we'll get to them as we're going through these questions, because most of the things that you mentioned, I had some questions about, at least, that are like kind of related.
Yeah.
So the first one, which you did cover a little bit, was it does seem like maybe it is a little bit too much to be applying for because there are so many projects. The idea being it will reduce the output value of the projects potentially if I'm working on more, right?
Mm. I mean, I think it would be a minus to some degree. I think to have too crowded in that sense of an application. I think the podcast, for example, that to me sounds like something that can be added upon any amount of research projects, just
Right.
as long as your research projects aren't crowding each other out. So then it's in that case, it's like, what would you cut? What do you think brings highest value to your career shift and so on? Would be the question. I don't know if you need to cut anything here. I think there is a sense to which like it's pretty well set up at the moment. I guess I would just have a question of what is the reason why there's multiple? What is your time allocation expected to be, and what is the outcome of there being multiple? So one thing, for example, is like, I expect this can become a publication with 10 hours of work a week for this amount of weeks.
Okay.
And that's nice. Then they see, oh, okay, well, we're enabling this and that. Then there is a risk in this of, I don't know, I guess I would be interested in seeing a reformulation that looks a bit like title looks a bit like transitioning from computational modeling and security incident analysis to AI safety with something years experience, or like with something years experience, or like with a focus on model evaluations for governance.
Okay.
Or just like anything in that form. And then when you get to the description, you like write your own motivation, where you want to be as a person, as a researcher, and then you write the projects. I think that probably works quite well.
Okay, so then just like sort of restructuring it so that the like target is more established up front.
Yeah.
Of like, okay, and I felt like I kind of did that, but I do definitely think I could do that more. And so just doing that as much as possible, because that's for this application especially is like what the purpose is.
Yeah, so they want to hear who you are, first of all. They want to see that you're capable, and they want to know where you are planning to go, so they know what they're supporting or something like that.
Okay.
And then a big part of planning where to go is, of course, the projects. But I guess the biggest part is in reality, like which field of research do you want to be in? What is your plan with that, or something like that? Yeah.
Okay, cool. Next question is quick. They ask about SAT and ACT scores. I have no clue what these are. Like, I have taken the ACT and SAT. I forgot those as soon as I applied to college because I don't like that's not something that I've ever focused on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it worth trying to find these?
So I assume if you have your graduate academic printout, that it should be fine. But I would just like read the text, because I assume they just want SAT, ACT scores when you don't have an undergraduate or don't have a graduate degree.
Okay. It doesn't have any like description of it. It's similar to like one of the date questions where it just has, like put these here if you have them.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. I mean, if you have choose the one that represents your best, I guess.
Okay.
And if you don't have SAT, ACT scores, then I don't think it hurts. Yeah. They're gonna want to see the latest anyways, and I think a graduate academic printout is pretty representative.
Okay. So then you mentioned this as well, but I wasn't totally sure how to do this. So the question is, do I undersell do I undersell the downside of not knowing sooner about the like whether I get funding or not?
Mm-hmm.
And what you described when you said maybe it's not just opportunity cost, which was your description was what I was intending to like elicit, I guess, by saying opportunity cost. But I don't know what to say then instead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite all right as it stands. I think it's a bit of a weird question generally, because it's like, yeah, I mean, if I'm replacing my part-time salary with this, I'm gonna not work on my part-time job. And so the opportunity cost is like, I can quit my part-time job earlier and work more on AI safety and transition quicker and like be more engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And there is another version of this which happens sometimes, which is like, I think it's the same one, but it's just like, I'll be out of house and home if I quit my part-time job at the moment. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's the same one, but you don't have to make it more dramatic than it is currently. Like it sounds good. I think it should be all right.
Okay. Next one is, do I address the important issues in the proposal question and the thoughts on the format? So I think you talked about this a little bit with like maybe being more explicit with where I'm trying to end up. So like specifying the goal description to be even more specific than it is.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I guess what are your other thoughts on?
So the two questions are basically, what are the career capital building activities you're going to take? And there they would probably love to know, well, there's this 5-month thing. It's going to cost this for me to engage myself with it or whatever. They don't need the cost thing, but it's nice to know what is the sort of commitment you're doing. And then it says what types of career tracks your proposed activity would help you pursue. Yeah, and how that then helps X risk or otherwise improve the long-term future. So here you jump directly into the projects themselves. And I think you explain a bit more in the personal statement, but I would probably go in and say, I am pursuing this career. These are the projects I do it with. This is the reason I'm pursuing this career. Yeah. So I'd say like, I'm pursuing this career track with this as a possible side. And it's for this reason, because model evaluations is really important for making sure that governments can understand model stuff. And these are the ways I'm doing it at the moment, with the express purpose of getting here, wherever that is, right?
Okay.
To a state where my CV looks good for governments or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And then the next question is similar, but for the personal statement, because I just don't really have much experience writing this kind of thing. I think that the reasoning transparency document will probably help with that. So I'll read through that as well. But yeah, any additional thoughts on the personal statement?
I guess like this is a nice biography of how you got into it. I think that is pretty good. I think the takeaway is especially nice. I guess what they're seeking is sort of, what they're asking is basically why, for you personally, what have you done before that says, yeah, this is your why, and how have you acted due to this? And I think your like small biography here like shows it pretty well. Like, you began aggressively pursuing this because you saw it as really impactful, and so you might emphasize more like student group stuff if you've been involved in that, and what sort of conversations you had as a 17-year-old or whatever. I think that's probably what they'd like to hear.
Yeah. Can you elaborate a little bit on that last part? I'm not totally sure I understand.
Yeah, it's just like getting examples of this being an inherent property of you or something. Okay. I guess like the why you want to do good stuff. Or, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then one thing you'd mentioned is like saying that I'd gotten a few interviews, but none panned out. It seems that it was due to like lack of credentials of like not having more industry experience or a PhD, and also not having like pure DevOps computer science experience are the two primary reasons that like those weren't working out, which I don't think are bad to mention.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's pretty good to mention.
Okay.
Because that also affects, right? Like then you are doing real research projects that pan out into publications as part of building up that career capital that's needed.
Okay. And then the rest of the questions that I have are all about the funding. So it sounds like I don't need as comprehensive of a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So do I just write like the one line then of like standard funding for 6 months, or like should I add in additional items?
I think you would probably put together all of the like research technical support into one.
Okay.
And then you would probably say like EAG, Berkeley, and other conferences, and put that into one as well. And then you would make it a bit simpler, and then you would say, salary, and then maybe parentheses 75% of part-time hourly salary, this amount of money. And then you have these three main ones that actually sort of say it all.
Okay. And then do you think even like having a spreadsheet is worthwhile then? It seems like probably not.
Yeah, it's sometimes a bit difficult. I think it's probably not necessarily too helpful.
Okay.
In the
I think
sense
it's still
that,
valuable for me
yeah, exactly.
to have made it, but I don't think I need to link it in
Yeah.
here. How do I estimate compute and like publication costs? Because I don't have experience with that either.
Yeah, so publication costs, I mean, there are none for computer science conferences, which is where AI safety is often published. And
Oh,
then the
okay.
main cost is the tickets for the conference, and then flying to the conference and all this sort of stuff, conference attendance. So that goes up to, a solid, quite a bit. Like, can be $1,500, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So okay, that makes sense. And then let's see. So it does seem good to include conferences then. Like that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I think so. Because you might have like, you know, research support and technical extra things or whatever, productivity things that are those things at the top. Yeah, and then sometimes you would lump the conferences in there together, but it might be good to have the conferences separate. I think that's fine. Yeah.
So you do think that including the cost of living is good. So maybe I should write something in the like proposal that's written that just says like X% of this would go to cost of living, or
Yeah, like it's good to show that you've thought about it, and like, for example, saying salary will cover this and that.
let's see. Okay, the another like sort of extension of the money question is, so my current salary is not that much. Like it's lower than I want it to be, for a number of reasons. So then do I just not include like the percentage of current?
Uh,
Um, or
yeah. So I mean, if it's like unfair reasons for it, right? Which I assume it is, then if basically if you look at your living costs and your current salary doesn't cover it, then like that's dumb. And then you just like say, I've estimated my cost of living, and then including tax, that comes out to about cost of living in Boulder and tax is about this.
okay.
Oh, no.
And then the another extension is like that's the average cost of living in Boulder. My cost of living is significantly under that, because I'm living with my parents, for example. So like I'm not paying rent. Um,
So
do
there's
I like is that yeah
yeah. So would you like to move out, for example?
yes
Yeah. So I mean, if you want to move out, right, you want a normal salary, you want a fair salary, and that's like super fair. And
okay
this is part of what's up. And you're educated at this level. Yeah. Like I was just looking through the Danish state's standard salary sheet that they negotiated every year with the unions, right? And there you have all of the salaries are just like pre-programmed. So that's really helpful for any estimates of Danish salaries. But I don't know if there's the same sort of system for like your job position, your level of experience, your
yeah. Based on my understanding, it's like around 100,000 is like mean for my experience and this area
yeah. So that's per year, right?
per year. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then that's, then if that's the mean for your position, then your median request is like 37.5K, which is then 75% or something of local stuff, and then your top level is like, and then
right,
you might have like 50,000.
Okay. And then, can I ask for more time? That's another question that I had.
For an extension? Oh, for the whole thing?
Yeah, so I have it currently as 6 months, but I wasn't sure how long they were willing to.
Yeah, so I mean,
fund.
they are interested in you transitioning careers, and so if you need more time than 6 months for that to feel safe in it, then that's nice. I think in many cases you would mostly get this if you had a graduate degree lined up or something like that, if there was a known thing at the end of the line. While if you work on like these projects, there should be like very legible output that makes them say, yeah, we'd pay for this. Like, and there I think 6 months is probably good to ask for. Like, might be a little, like that would fit with the publication cycle in the sense of building up CV, and then you can look for jobs for 3-5 months or something. Would probably give it 8 months instead, and then.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense. And I think that covers any of all of the questions I had.
Nice. Perfect.
So the other places to fund, you've written LTFF, Lightspeed, possibly, and Mana Fund.
Yeah, and we'll have more there. There are some quite specific ones that are open at the moment, but we'll share that on the page. So one thing is, for example, or whatever. They are called something like that.
Okay. And then, since I'm doing the another question I had is, since I'm doing the podcast, can I, so I'm paying someone else then effectively to do the editing, right, as a contractor.
Mm.
So, to what extent should I include their information, like that information, in here if I'm working closely with them, or should I not be? That's sort of something that they can apply for themselves, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you would, if anything, you would have it as an optional thing.
Okay.
And you probably wouldn't have it. You would say like, this is something I cover with my career transition funding or something like that.
Okay, gotcha.
Agree. And then they would need to get their own if they're in such a position. Of course, if they're actually just like an editor, then maybe you'd want to include it. But I think that's a bit. It's like this is not a project funding thing. This is a career transition funding thing. So they're probably not as interested in funding like a project team, or what you might say.
Right. No, that makes sense. Okay, cool. Is there anything else you wanted to mention or talk about, or any other thoughts you had on the application?
I think I have to go now, unfortunately.
Okay.
But yeah, maybe I'll have some more thoughts. Otherwise, we'll write some more in the application there as well, or in the guide. Yeah, that's short of it. I hope that was valuable.
Yeah, it was. Thank you so much.
Of course. And I hope it comes out to a great episode.
Cool.
Chat with you later. Have fun. Ciao.
Bye. Definitely an unconventional episode, but hopefully hearing someone who has experience with funding going through an application is helpful to, well, probably some of you. As I mentioned previously, you can check out the version of my application that we were discussing here in the show notes. I will also include a collection of potential places to look for funding on this episode's page of the Into AI Safety podcast website. If you found this one valuable, please take a minute to let me know by adding a review to the podcast. It turns out that getting those reviews is really helpful for helping the podcast reach even more people. Well, guess I'll see you next time.